With that, it is my great honor to invite the Vice Chair of our Metropolis Council, Archon Isidros Garofilaikis, who is a tireless servant on behalf of the Lord and on behalf of all of us in so many different capacities, not the least of which is his work on the Metropolis Council. So, Archon, if you would please give your address.
Christos Anesti. It is an honor to serve this metropolis as a vice president and to support the dynamic ministry of His Eminence Metropolitan Erasmus. I was elected to serve in this position last fall, stepping into the role of vice president following in the footsteps of my good friend and dedicated leader, Fanis Economidis. I'm grateful to carry on the good works that he started over the past few decades. And I will do my very best, with God's help, to continue guiding the work of the Metropolis Council with the blessing of Metropolitan Erasmus. I would like to take the opportunity to share with you the recent efforts of the Metropolis Council, a group of 24 dedicated clergy and lay leaders who generously volunteer their time leading committees, working with our ministers and being mindful of our shared responsibility to safeguard and steward the finances of our metropolis. The Executive Committee of the Metropolis Council meets monthly, Zoom, and the Council meets quarterly, 2 times a year in person and 2 times through Zoom. It is important that we stay connected and in close communication with each other because we have so many wonderful things happening in our metropolis. Last night, you heard from our minister leaders, and we enjoyed a beautiful evening on the courtyard. I hope you were all as impressed as I was with the many good works of our ministers. Later today, we will review the finances of our metropolis, but I would like to share with you something that's very important to me. And that is our Faith Forward stewardship program. In your registration bag, you receive a copy of our Faith Forward brochure. The support we receive each year through Faith Forward has tremendous and positive impact in our budget. We start Faith Forward 2007 and raised just over 60,000. I am pleased to share with you that in 2022, we raised over 484,000. Thanks to your generosity, more people are not just giving generously, but they're also become monthly donors to the metropolis, for which we are especially grateful. Please join us as a Faith Forward 2023. You will also see in your registration bags that we are going to have our Metropolis Gala this October 28th in San Francisco. This is an important fundraising event that helps us fund the expansion of our ministers. It has been 5 years since we had the gala, and will take the support of all our parishes to make this event a reality. We'll be celebrating the 100 years of our metropolis, and will also honor the extraordinary leadership of our metropolis for these past 100 years, including honoring His Eminence Metropolitan Gerasimus, as our spiritual father and shepherd. More information on this event will be coming out within the next month, and we hope and I pray we can count on your support. Yesterday, you heard from our Metropolitan about his ongoing vision for our metropolis. And he talked about the theme of this assembly: let your light shine. This esteem of Metropolis Council has embraced and will continue to emphasize these positive messages through the remainder of this year. For the meeting of our Metropolis Council on Sunday night, we had very engaging discussion about the vision for our metropolis. Where have been, where we are, and where do we need to go? We'll continue this discussion on a regular basis to make sure that we are doing our very best to meet the needs of our clergy, parishes, and faithful, that we're always open to your input. As His Eminence said yesterday, this is the first time since 2020 that we have been able to get together for the Clergy-Laity Assembly. We hope that you have found this gathering to be beneficial, and we will continue to do our very best in finding even more ways to support each of you as you serve your parishes. Thank you for your support, collaboration. Thank you, and I challenge you to take back to your communities the messages of the vibrancy of our metropolis. And I look forward to accomplishing even more great things with God's help and under the inspired leadership of our Metropolitan Gerasimus. Thank you so much, and have a blessed day.
Because we are a family, I want to just emphasize the presence and the faith of this man who is very humble, along with his family. He doesn't toot his horn at all. He is very, how can I say, true, down-to-earth Christian. And I want to thank him in your presence and on behalf of the metropolis for the countless blessings that he has given to us. Not the financial aspect only, his presence, his support, and his true Christian faith. And one small P.S. He was blessed to be in the presence as a young man of a saint, Saint Iakovos Tsalikis of Evia. He was his altar boy. So there is a kind of testimony, his presence in his life, along with his beloved wife and his family, their service to God through the church, of the testimony of the saints of the church sometimes they work the miracles that we so much seeking after. So, Archon Isidore, I want to thank you for the presence and above all for your faithfulness to the Orthodox faith and to our culture. God bless you.
Thank you, Archon. So next up, we have the report on total commitment and pension benefits funding by Philippos Athanasiadis. Please take the microphone.
Your Eminence, Your Grace, Archon Garifalakis, Deacon Bozel, President of the Philoptochos, dear Reverend Fathers, brothers and sisters in Christ, dear friends, it gives me, first of all, great joy to see you all in person. We've met each other on Zoom so many times, and it's a real joy to actually meet you, embrace you, shake your hands, and wish you Christos Anesti. There are a lot of numbers that I could share with you, but I'm not going to bore you with that, other than to say that for 2022, your parishes, your contributions were at 100% of what we needed to contribute to our archdiocese, which funds our archdiocese, our metropolis, our Holy Cross School, and our patriarchate, most important of all. For 2023, the letters, I believe, will be going out at the end of this week, and we will invite you to enter your data, submit online all your financial information, and I want to take this opportunity to urge you to use us. I want to introduce another two members of the team that are present here, Christine Psefteas and Chris Kalambokis. Another two members cannot be present here. Sam Daoud, he is in Utah right now. He moved from Bakersfield to Utah, but he's still serving and helping this committee. And Irene Melides, who's offered her services very lately. We'll be reaching out to you. You will see our names in the letters that you're going to receive. We are not your auditors, we are your resource. Please use us. If you have any way, any doubts, any help that you need, this is what we're here for, to serve you, to complete this process as seamlessly as possible. We are at your disposal. You'll have our emails, you'll have our telephone numbers. Most of you have them already and have been reaching out at different points in time, and you are most welcome to do that. I want to note finally that through your efforts, this metropolis is unique in our archdiocese in that we are contributing 108% of our allocation to our pension fund. That is our fulfillment of the covenant that we have with these men that are sitting amongst us, our clergy, to ensure that when they do retire, they will have a decent retirement. This is our duty to them. With that, I will open up for any questions that you might have, anything that you might need to ask. I am very happy to see this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Philippos. All right. Such an excellent report. There was nothing further to add. With that, it's my pleasure to ask up my dear friend George Psefteas to talk about the financial report, the review engagement, and then our budget presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Bear with us for a moment. Paul's going to try and connect me directly here. And while Paul's doing that, Christos Anesti. Okay. You know, a number of you came up to me yesterday after the inspiring presentations that we had from all our ministries and programs and said, can you make all the financial stuff a little more interesting? Can you do something like what everybody else did? And I said, okay, challenge accepted. Let me think about that for a while. And then I thought, I'm not going to do that because you don't want the person presenting your finances to be doing a song and dance up here. So that's my dad joke for the day. Okay, all right. Okay, and then I thought some more and I said, well, you know, what we're going to talk about today really is in the context of all of our programs and ministries. So I should be able to get 2 minutes for each ministry. So that gives me about 25 minutes. And then in the context of yesterday, that means about an hour. So you've got me here for a little while. But I do realize I'm the one standing between you and your journey home. So I will not keep you until 3 o'clock or 3:30. As we get all this ready, let me start out. I do want to make it topical and relevant. And I want to talk about the connection, the oneness, how we are all connected. Because all joking aside, I did have a couple people approach me yesterday and say, you know, it's fantastic what we're doing as a metropolis with all our programs and ministries, but we don't really know how we're connected with ministries and programs to the Archdiocese, not in a real meaningful or deep way. And I think that those questions came about because we do have a storyboard or a poster at the back of this room that talks about the journey of your dollar. I'm not going to talk about the ministries and programs of the Archdiocese, but I do want to put some context to that poster. And by the way, that Journey of Your Dollar poster is on our Metropolis website. It's also in print at the back of this room, so if any of you would like to take a copy to share with your parish councils, other ministry and parish leadership, please take it. Please go on the website and take a look. But our connection, and forgive me for those of you that already know this, I'm going to be repeating myself. Your total commitment contributions from your parishes, which we're deeply grateful for, as Filippo has said, those go to the Archdiocese. They support the church at the national level and at the patriarchal level to a degree as well. But 30 cents of every dollar that your parish contributes comes back to the metropolis. And that's important because that 30 cents funds really the management of the metropolis, the ability of the metropolis itself to be able to maintain and sustain and grow the programs and the ministries that you all heard about yesterday and that you've been hearing about these past few days, and hopefully that you're experiencing and living. At the metropolis level, the budget that the metropolis has, some people may not be aware, but around 63 cents of every dollar that the metropolis spends, it spends on its ministries and its programs, not on administration. What we get from the Archdiocese really covers most of the administration, but really it's all those efforts that Archon Isidros mentioned, the Faith Forward efforts, the galas that we host every 2 years, and actually it's been 5 years, and you know, by the grace of God, we'll be able to put one on later this year. But it's those events and those fundraising efforts that really fund the ministries and the programs that we have, as well as the ministries and programs themselves. We have a number of programs and ministries that are self-funding and self-sustaining. And FDF is a great example of that. The Young Adult Conference is a great example of that, and there are many other examples of that. So I just wanted to put that in perspective because 8 or 9 years ago, and I'm probably not getting the dates right, but you know, we went through a strategic plan effort at this metropolis, and those efforts are being looked at again and trying to be refreshed, and there'll be more information on that in the months ahead. But part of what that strategic plan identified were certain core values. And I'm not going to name them all, but Christ-centered was one of them. Stewardship, integrity, transparency, and accountability, financial responsibility. And at least from a financial standpoint, as well as from many other standpoints, we've tried to really live up to that. So hopefully you've been seeing that. I, too, have been blessed by recognizing many of you, by being recognized by many of you. One of the blessings that came from COVID certainly was the fact that we were able to set up these Zoom calls and get to know each other a little bit better. And that was more frequent in the beginning, And then it tapered off a little bit as we got toward the end of those lockdowns, and then has really tapered off. And one of the discussions that we had at our Metropolis Council meetings before the Clergy-Laity was we really need to bring that back. And we are going to bring that back so that we can stay connected with all of you. And we're also lobbying maybe for some regional in-person visits, and we'll see how we can make that happen and come and see you in person as well as on Zoom. And with that, I was going to jump right into some financial stuff, but my laptop was taken away. So it's just... I will, again, while we're waiting for that, I'll talk a little bit about the review engagement. So those of you that are here for the first time, it's going to be the first time you're hearing this. Those of you that have participated for the last couple of years, you know that we are under archdiocesan regulation. We are required, we as a metropolis are required to have our financial statements either formally audited or reviewed. Those are two different classifications of independent third-party review by an independent auditor. And most of our metropolises, if not all of our metropolises, have done so. We had not been practicing this. We started with our 2019 and 2020 year. We had a few revelations along the way in that primarily St. Nicholas Ranch, because of its, from a legal standpoint and an accounting standpoint, because of common management and control, had to be consolidated with the metropolis's financials. So it took a great deal of time. It's been about 2 years now. It took a great deal of time to compile all that information. The first time you engage with an auditor, they have certain obligations that they're required to fulfill. One of them being they have to look at a number of years worth of history to satisfy themselves that the years that they're reporting on are as they should be. So there's been a lot of work going on in the background, and it was my sincere hope that we could have those financials finished and ready for you by this Clergy-Laity Assembly. We're roughly 2 months out. So those 2019-2020 independently reviewed statements will be placed on our website. I will ask His Grace to send a note out to all the parishes when that is done with a link so that you can view those, and those, of course, will also be provided to the Archdiocese. Immediately following the completion of that exercise in a couple months, we're going to begin with our 2021 and 2022 financials. So yes, we're going to take a look at 2022 financials here. We're going to approve a 2023 budget. We don't anticipate numbers to change in any significant or material way, but the presentation of those financials will be in a true not-for-profit format, and they will have been reviewed by an independent auditor. So that's what's coming next. We will talk about, yes, we can talk a little bit about the numbers. Yes?
Why are we not doing the formal audit of other metropolises?
We had, it was not a requirement prior to 2019. The requirement under the regulation is either an audit or a review engagement. To be very transparent, the review engagement affords us two things. It's more cost effective, and it also gives us the opportunity to see where we have recommendations from the auditor that we can implement before we go and do a full audit. The intent is to move and start doing a full audit, and that is going to happen. Yeah. Any other questions on the engagement? Okay, so I'm not going to put numbers, I'm going to keep going because I don't want to delay.
Yeah, so sorry, George.
That's okay, that's okay. Now, the financials were provided, by the way, in your downloadable material. Hopefully some of you have had a chance to look at them. I will throw a few numbers out there, but within context, and hopefully it'll all make sense, and we'll go from there. I do want to put in a pitch, by the way. Some of the other materials, and it may have been lost on some people, when you open up the financial package in the downloadable material, I think it's around 94 pages long. Yeah, and so it's like, I'm not going to go through 94 pages of numbers. It's not 94 pages of numbers. Probably the first 8 pages are the financial report for 2022 and the budget for 2023, but after that, we have produced, and I'm calling them living documents, but at your request, we have produced some guidelines. And so some parishes have asked us for audit guidelines. Hey, how do we do an internal audit at our parish? What things should we be looking for? Those audit guidelines are in there. They're not external audit, they're internal audit. So when your auditors come in once a year and they look at stuff, there's a checklist in there and some guidance as to what they can do. There's also some general financial guidelines, some of which were created at the time of the last strategic plan in 2015. They've been refreshed, and they're up to date, and they're there for you all to use and share with your treasurers and your parish councils. So these are things that you all told us over those many COVID Zoom calls, and we've been taking some time to put it all together, and hopefully you'll find it all useful. To take a page out of Philippos's book, call us. We do have an email address now at the Metropolis. It's finance@sanfran.goarch.org. Feel free to use it, and one of us will definitely get back to you. So, with that, I'm going to move to the 2022 financials. You will, for those of you that have seen it, you will have noticed, and I will tell you for those of you that didn't have time to look at it, our decrease in net assets, we always like to say we broke even or we had an increase in net assets, and we're moving to a not-for-profit format and terminology, so I'm going to try and stick to that as much as possible. I may go back to a for-profit, but I'm going to try not to do that. So what used to be known as net income, we say our total increase in net assets. We actually had a decrease in net assets, and that was approximately $225,000. So nobody likes to hear that because it's like, hey, you know, what's going on? Really, that decrease in net assets is not on the operation side, it's more on the restricted side. So we had a bunch of monies that were donated for specific purposes. One specific purpose was the Archdiocesan Centennial, and that came in as a restricted donation, and the payout, when that flowed through as a restricted expense. It's not, I will be honest, these financials are not shown in a proper not-for-profit format. It's kind of a hybrid between profit and not-for-profit. That is all going to be taken care of. The numbers won't change. The presentation will change. I'm saying this also because we have some very esteemed members on our finance committee now that are much more in tune with not-for-profit reporting. So that $225,000 net decrease in assets really is driven by, it's a decrease in cash. If you look at it, you say, well, what's really driving all this? Well, what's driving it is amounts that we are paying out under dollars that were donated for restricted purposes. That's actually a good thing if you think about it. So when people give you money and they say, I want you to use it for the Archdiocesan Centennial, I want you to use it for a patriarchal gift, we cannot use it for other purposes. It must be used for those purposes. So when that money is paid out, it's an outflow, and it shows as a negative. When you look at our operating budget, however, and our actual operating results, our operating actual results were a net decrease of approximately $45,000. And more than half of that $45,000 decrease was because of market forces. We have monies invested, and frankly, there was a downturn in the market, and that's what resulted in a lot of that 45,000, about 26,000 was that reason, okay?
When are we going to see the new kind of statement where you're talking about?
So the externally reported ones, 19 and 20, you should see within a couple months, and you'll be informed when that happens. 21 and 22, hopefully you should see by the Clergy-Laity of next year, along with 2023. We're getting up to date. So that is our goal. That is our goal, okay? So now, in terms of 2023, we are putting those in not-for-profit format, and we expect to have it in full not-for-profit format before we get to the end of this year. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay. In terms of our cash balances, if I tell you about our balance sheet, we do have strong cash balances, and we have done a very good job of, and we do have a good track record of controlling our expenses, managing our expenses, and increasing our bank account dollars. Now, depending on when you look at our bank accounts, sometimes you see a lower amount than you would expect, sometimes you see a higher amount. Our Faith Forward program, even though it's available 12 months out of the year, it really kicks in the last 3 months of the year. So that's when you'll see the balances grow fairly robustly. So even though I've said that we've gone down by $300,000, that is true, but that number continues to grow each month through various donations. And with the gala this year, we have some targets. We're hoping to be able to raise enough funds to make up for the fact that we didn't have a gala 2 years ago. Those are my only comments on that one. From an income statement standpoint or a statement of activity standpoint, I mentioned the 225. I mentioned the over $100,000 that we raised for the Archdiocesan Centennial. Our core inputs or income that go into our statement of activities are really our Archdiocesan allotment and the Metropolis Ministries funding sharing that come from your parishes. These are the quarterly amounts, as well as our Faith Forward programs. Those have grown. Actually, we were very successful with the Faith Forward program, as the Archon mentioned. On the Archdiocesan allotment side, our base allotment stayed flat, and we actually did get a little bit more because we met 100%. You met 100% of your total commitment, and that was a positive. We are projecting a little bit less, and I'll get to that when we get to the budget, because of certain decisions that we made over the past couple years. And those decisions really were how we shared total commitment, Paycheck Protection Program monies that were given to us or shared with us from the Archdiocese, and how we decided to share those with all of you. And we did decide to share those with all of you across the board, and because of that decision, we are receiving a little bit less in the couple of years going forward from the Archdiocese because of the way that these formulas work. That's not a pity party comment. We knew full well what we were doing, and it was the right thing to do, but that's why you're going to be seeing some numbers a little bit lower in the budget than we've seen in the past couple years in that area. That's all I had on 2022 financial reporting. Did anyone have any other questions on 2022? Yes.
Tagging on to something you said earlier, do you have any recommendations or are there written guidelines for parishes on what we might be doing for our parishes in terms of either an audit or review or something else independent of the parish?
Yeah, so there is, so in the audit guidelines document, there is either a paragraph or more on, it's always a best practice for a parish to consider having an external review engagement or an audit. That's not a requirement under the Archdiocesan regulations. Some parishes actually do go out and have a third-party engagement done. Others do not. And that's really a discussion around your parish council table with your priest and what makes most sense for your parish. Yeah. Father?
Just a quick question on, just the statement of activities.
Yes.
The camps and conferences expenses was significantly more than 2021. Just curious if that's related to just more activities, or it makes up about half the deficit.
You're right. I hope I'm looking at the same line as you are. So the camps and conferences expenses were up significantly, about 30% from 2021. We really had no camps in 2021. So that's why you're seeing a significant increase. If you look a few lines further up, where you see summer camp and youth ministries was relatively flat, but when you look at summer camp was up over 300%. So we did go back to a cadence of, I don't know where Johanna is, and I don't want to misspeak, but I won't say we were back to pre-pandemic levels, but we were back to offering our camps as we used to previously. Yeah. You're welcome. Okay, if there's no other questions on 2022 financials, I can move on to the 2023 budget. Okay, this unfortunately is something I would have liked to have shown up on screen, so I'll try and describe the way that we've laid out the budget, and this is the operational budget of the metropolis. So it doesn't really cover unknowns or unexpecteds. A lot of the restricted stuff is not in here. As I said, monies are earmarked for that, so we don't put it in, but it's the operational side. We do have our programs and ministries in here as well, and a lot of that, even restricted ministries and programs, because we want the transparency. Those are ins and outs. Those just flow right through. They're zero. So the very top of the budget on the revenue line, we are projecting an operational revenue of just under $1.35 million. That is funded by the Archdiocesan allotment. Any commitment sharing we get, that's what I mentioned earlier. We expect a little bit less of commitment sharing. Any registration fees and any other negligible, immaterial, non-operating revenue. So that compares to a budget of 1.35 for 2022. We're at 1.348 for 2023. So relatively flat. Then we go down to various revenues that we would expect to get from our unrestricted ministries. And then we bring in the revenue aspect of our restricted ministries, which is completely offset by the expenses in the expense section. So from a total revenue standpoint, we're looking at $3.8 million of a budget for 2023 versus a $3.3 million budget for 2022. That entire $500,000 is really driven by increases in those restricted ministries, primarily FDF and the Young Adult Conference. So every dollar of revenue is offset by every dollar of expense in those ministries. That's the way we funnel it through the metropolis. But the core metropolis operating budget has stayed flat. The revenues have stayed flat, and those are intended to cover the operating expenses of the metropolis. On the operating expense side, virtually every category has stayed flat. Those of you that are looking at those statements will notice that there's a significant increase in clergy-laity cost on the expense side. That is fully offset by clergy-laity revenue on the revenue side, because this is the first time in a number of years, of course 3 years, that we've been able to do this in person, and there are costs associated with that. But those costs are fully offset. So again, net zero impact on the overall budget. Other notable areas to mention, payroll and benefits were relatively flat with where we were for the budget for 2022. You'll notice the actuals for 2022 were a little bit higher. There have been some changes at the way that we're allocating payroll from the standpoint of payroll associated with our ministries is allocated in the ministries section, moving a couple things around. No one has been hired and no one has been let go. It's not that issue. And for those of you that were not aware, the payroll and the insurance are largely what are covered through that 30 cents that we get back from the Archdiocese. Another area is the insurance. As I mentioned, the insurance is largely out of our control. We do perform diligence on the increases that we get. We don't just accept the number, but it's the Archdiocese that has blanket coverage for property liability and workers' comp and a whole bunch of other categories of insurance. Those are allocated to all of the metropolises based on the contribution of those metropolises to the overall archdiocesan budget. As all of you know, within your own parishes, insurance costs, particularly in the last number of years, have been going north, not south. And yes, that's right.
George, when did the 25% to 30% occur, the change?
There's no change. It's an excellent question, Father. So the 30% includes the total commitment sharing. So what we used to call years back the bonus. So 25% of every dollar that you provide, 25% of our budgeted number for the Archdiocese, that comes back to us if we make at least 98% of our Archdiocesan budget. Anything above the 98%, there's a 2% sharing that we get for that. And then if there's a slight cushion that is provided in the numbers that come to you from the metropolis to allow for the fact that we don't always hit 100% every year. If we collect into that cushion, there's a larger percentage of that cushion comes back to the metropolis as well. So on average, it's the 30%. That's where the 30% comes in. Thank you. There's my parents. My parents and my kids. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
If I may make a point here. Years ago, we had a recommended cushion by the
went down to 6%. We are, thanks to your contributions, the cushion that we are operating now is a little bit less than 3%. So we've been able to reduce that cushion because you've been diligent in your contributions and for which you have my unending thanks.
Okay. Well, not exactly, because what's there is not what's here, and I'm moving here and it's not moving there, so it's okay. It's all right. Let's just leave it, Paul. We can turn the lights back on. That's fine. That's fine. Always got to be prepared, you know. Did that answer your question, Father? Okay. We were talking about the expenses. That really covers just about every other budget area has stayed fairly flat. And of course, when we budget for net zero. It's a zero-based budget. We start from the bottom up. We do go out to our programs and our ministries. They provide their inputs. If what they're requesting is, of course, not only reasonable, but also, within the mission of the metropolis. His Eminence really never says no, but we just need to challenge ourselves and find ways to make sure that we can continue to grow and sustain and manage our ministries. But the line that gets impacted then is the faith forward line, because to be able to balance, we say to ourselves, are we able to fundraise for ourselves the amounts that we need to meet the budget that we need for the metropolis? And time and again, and this is where our sincere thanks, collectively our sincere thanks, I'm speaking for all of you right now, forgive me for doing that,